instead of freaking out like most people do about what's the right investment, am I in the right investment? Should I take advantage of this? Should I do this? The first question we can now ask ourselves is, if I need to save X amount of money, I need, let's say, an 8% rate of return, which investments have done that historically? And what that does, it takes all this fear missing out and makes me laser focused on a much smaller group of investments. And what's cool is then I'm only researching stuff that matters to me.
This show is dedicated to helping you strengthen your family tree and live financially free. Welcome to the Marriage, Kids, and Money podcast, everybody. This is Andy Hill, and today we are talking about how we can start with the end in mind. Throughout our family financial journey, I always heard that I should be saving more and investing more. At its surface, it sounds like a smart idea, but it also sounds kind of boring. Save for what? Invest for what? Not only does it sound boring, but it can also just sort of lead to a lack of motivation. You keep doing it, but there's no real end. Well, our guest today is helping us put some definition around our saving and our investing. Returning to us once again here on the podcast is Joe Saul-Sehy. Joe is the host of the multi-award winning Stacking Benjamins podcast. After 16 years in the financial industry, Joe has taken his learnings and expertise and created one of the most listened to podcasts in the personal finance sphere. He's also the co-author of the new book, Stacked, Your Super Serious Guide to Modern Money Management, which is available now. And when Joe isn't helping his listeners and readers stack more Benjamins, he's enjoying beautiful Texarkana with his spouse, Cheryl, and his occasionally feisty cat, Cooper. Welcome to the show, Joe.
He is feisty, because more important than any of that, we used to be neighbors.
Yes, Joe used to live, just not even a mile away, and we would play board games. I'd watch his cat. Zoe actually made up a song about your cat while she was brushing her teeth. So we go way back.
That is, well, it was cool because we knew each other professionally first. And then when I moved to town, I was thrilled when I found out that we get to be neighbors. And yeah, we'll put it this way. It was drunk stumbling distance away from each other.
I thought I was doing the right thing by getting one of those like electric scooters, so I could scoot drunk back and forth from your house, but I'm not sure that was legal. At least I was staying on the sidewalk. Anyway, starting with the end in mind, why don't we jump back to that? You and I could talk all day. Let's talk about the start with the end in mind. I know you love this mantra by Stephen Covey. How can we apply this to our saving and our investing so it doesn't become boring or just sort of lack of motivation to do it?
Yeah, I think it's very difficult to save for some of these long-term goals. I messed it up with a sweater at Nordstrom and an American Express card that I never should have had, right? And by the way, I was at a military college. I was at the Military College, South Carolina, the Citadel. And so I couldn't even wear a sweater. And I'm in South Carolina. What do I do buying a sweater? But I bought it. I bought it on credit. No idea how I was going to pay for it. But I guess my point is that's a lot of us. I could see the sweater. I thought the sweater looked fantastic, right? I could imagine it on. It was the late 80s, so I was going to look like Duran Duran. It was going to be killer. We see the thing in front of us, Andy. We know what it is. We don't see these long-term goals. Like you hear, I used to call them when I was a financial planner, the Puritan ethic goals. People think we have this ethic that comes to us from a long, long time ago about I got to save for retirement, or I got to save for college, or I got to do this stuff. And it's funny because when I was a financial planner, people's eyes you see the fire go out of their eyes, right? And I would use this deli approach then of asking, well, what else, Andy? What else you saving for? What else you saving for? You know how you go to the deli and you're like, hey, I want some ham, and you get the ham, and then the person says, what else? I would do that. What else? What else? And finally they'd say, oh, you know what I really want? And they'd lean forward, and you could tell this is the real goal, right? This is the thing that we're really excited about. And they could see that goal. So the more we can see that goal on the end, like I saw that sweater at the mall, the easier it's going to be to save for that long-term thing, which, by the way, also gets rid of a problem that I think we have. We use these rules of thumb a lot, which, by the way, work, right? But the problem with the rule of thumb is it doesn't give us the texture. We can't see where we're going to be later on. And we're like, okay, if I 25x my lifestyle today, I got enough money, blah, blah, blah. Does that number work? Sure. Yeah, kind of. But does it take all the fun out of saving? It makes it this death march for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one approach that you talked about in your book is timelining your goals as opposed to just sort of these arbitrary numbers out there. So talk to us about what timelining your goals means.
There's some serious science behind this, and it's two things. Number one is as people, we have this fight or flight response, right? That we've got this little lizard brain, and the lizard brain isn't worried about the goal 25, 30 years from now. The lizard brain is worried about what do I have to deal with first, and let's get that out of the way. So how many times have you talked to friends, or maybe it's somebody hanging out with us here, Andy, listening, who's thinking to themselves, you know what? I will start investing once I get my debt paid off. Or I will start planning for my kids' college once I get this credit card taken care of. Or I will start. So we have this tendency to look at the next thing in line and not look long term. That's issue number one. Number two is our brains are very visual. In other words, how many times have we heard write down your goals? We hear this all the time. And, I don't know about you. You do interviews as much as I do. Every person that talks to me goes, well, you start off by writing down your goals. Okay, great. And by the way, that is the right thing to do. But we are visual. We are totally visual. There's three types of people in the world. There are visuals, audios, and kinesthetics. You can generally tell who's who because visuals will say that looks good, like even if they're listening they'll use the verbiage that looks good, or and audios will use sounds good to me. And then people that are kinesthetic, which is the smallest group, will say, well, this feels like a good thing. This really feels good. But even audios and kinesthetics, because we live in a very visual society, kind of think and adapt to visual ways of looking at things. When you put all your goals in a timeline that's visual, in other words, you take stick people that represent you and anybody else you're planning with on one end, and in the book we have, I don't know if you know this, Andy, but they have like a bag of money and a martini. So, so we put them on one end, and then you draw this timeline out of, okay, I've got retirement down here, and I've got all these goals that are in the middle. Then we see all of them. We don't just see the next thing. So now our lizard brain starts thinking about, oh, I got this big retirement thing that's out here. And we start asking a few natural questions. Question number one is, well, what do each of these goals cost? Like if I look at retirement and I back that down to today, there's this equation that looks like this. It's how much money do I need to save? What rate of return do I need to get that goal? And then I have all my other goals. So as an example, I remember this one family I was working with, and their child was going to go to college at the same time that they told me they wanted to retire. But they hadn't, they thought about, okay, I want to retire when I'm 55. And also we want to help our kid get through college. And then we put it on a timeline and I went, hey, I don't know if you ever noticed this, but your kid's a sophomore in college on the day you're going to retire. And they go, man, I never thought about that. And don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean you can't do it, but think about the awesome conversations that you and Nicole would have if you've got these two goals happening at the same time, or Cheryl and I would have, or whoever, or I even have internally if I'm doing it by myself. And what's great about timelining for me is that you start having these wonderful conversations about how do our goals play against each other? Which ones can we afford? Which ones can't we afford? Or if we can afford all of them, why don't we get more? Why don't we get more crazy, right? But if we can't afford them all, do we push it back? Do we lower the goal? Do we find ways to save more money? Like we open up all these cool conversations that really is the fabric of getting where we want to go.
I love that. And to your point on the visual reference, I am always more motivated when I can see the reality of what retirement is or that vacation. Like you don't go to vacation without looking at pictures of vacation, right? I mean, it's like, oh, I've heard this destination is nice. I'm not going to look at it at all. No, you need a visual of it. So you're like, yes, I am there. I'm excited. So to your point,
Well, I remember Andy with the first time we took our kids to Disney, and we stayed at a Disney hotel. and Disney, which is, by the way, 18 bags of money, right? That you're going to put at the altar of the mouse. But yeah, the martini is gone. Yes, we're barely going to make it. But I remember Disney sent us these maps of the parks, and my kids would go over these maps of the parks and dream about, like, oh, we're going to ride this, and we're going to ride that, and they'd show us pictures of the hotel, and we're staying at the Wilderness Lodge. It's gonna be this cool place, and yeah, you're right.
I love it, man. I love it. Well, let's talk about some of these big goals because I think that helps a lot of people visually. Even we can describe it. So we're talking about retirement. We've placed it on our timeline. How does somebody decide where it goes on the timeline? How can I get there? Kind of talk to us about that process of about placing that at the right place and making sure the picture looks great.
Yeah, good point. The key there, Andy, I think, is placing it wherever the hell you want. Number one, but place it where you want, and let's see if it works, right? Because it's going to be a very simple math equation. Still going to be, I'm going to need to save X amount of money. Y return on my money to get the goal. Now, the important thing isn't just retirement; it's how does retirement jive, I guess, to use the technical word, how does it jive with your other goals? Like I mentioned with college, college might end up intersecting, or I might have these medium term goals that I think I want more than an early retirement. Also, another key is, I think that when it comes to retirement, if you're close to retirement, a lot of the time the timeline, you can break down that retirement goal. As an example, you some people have in their early years, they've got a lot of stuff they want to do during retirement. I want to travel here, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to buy the RV, I might want a second house, I got all these things. So I can take that big retirement goal, and now I can build a timeline of what I want to do during those healthy years that I have. And you hear about people that are big time retirement planners talk about, you've got your short term bucket, your middle term bucket, and still the long term bucket. Big mistake people make when they get to retirement is they take all their money and they put it in that short-term bucket, as if they're going to retire at age 55 and they're going to spend every dollar within. That's never going to happen. So you need some money early, middle, late. But I think for most people listening, especially if they're still in the family and the planning stage, it's much more about set it where you want it and see if you can get it. And by the way, the cool thing about this too that we didn't mention, we mentioned a few cool things. Here's another one. Cool thing about timelining your goals is this, is that everybody worries, as you know, like, what's the right investment? Like, I see you on social media, people are asking you that, Andy, all the time. Like, hey, what's the right investment? Heck, I remember when you were deciding if you were going to go into real estate. Remember when you were thinking, about buying properties, buying houses? Is this the right investment or is it not? But the first thing should be this: investments have growing seasons. And so if you think about, I grew up in West Michigan in farm country, and everything had a growing season. Corn, you planted at a certain time and then you harvested it at a certain time. And you didn't do it differently than that. Why? Because you knew it worked. And investments are kind of the same way. For short term things, you've got savings accounts, money markets, CDs. Middle term, you might have bonds, or a little medium term, like 7, 8 years, you might go into balanced funds. But you get 10 years and longer, stocks and real estate historically have kicked inflation's butt. So those are good there. So instead of freaking out like most people do about what's the right investment, am I in the right investment? Should I take advantage of this? Should I do this? The first question we can now ask ourselves is, if I need to save X amount of money and I need, let's say, an 8% rate of return, which investments have done that historically? Like, and what that does, it takes all this fear missing out and makes me laser focused on a much smaller group of investments. And what's cool is then I'm only researching stuff that matters to me. And the back of my head is always kind of telling me, oh, I'm missing something. The chance that you're missing something, I think, is also a lot less than.
Yeah, I like that, especially as you're thinking about what the goal is, how far away the goal is, and how you can maybe relax a little bit. With regard to, I really like how you broke down even retirement's got its own seasons. I've heard it as the go, the slow go, the no go. Where eventually you're not going to go very much, but you still need some money to live. So as you're breaking down the retirement side of things, You're also maybe deciding how much am I going to need in the initial stages. I originally I was kind of gung ho about this fire stuff and financial independence. I'm like, I eventually don't want to work at all. I think that'd be really neat. But now I've got a job that I really love, and I'm thinking about that in my retirement. Do I don't know if I want to ever stop working. How does somebody who actually appreciates what they do and they're not looking for that finish line to cross have that impact how much they need to save and where they need to put it with regard to their, I guess, official retirement age?
No, I think the key is that we, especially people that are money geeks listening to this, we love to solve for optimization. And unfortunately, I think, Andy, we do it too much. I think we don't solve enough for, seriously, I don't think we solve enough for flexibility. We need to solve more often for the fact that we might not feel later on the same way we feel today about our goals. I see people in their late 20s who say online that they'd be happy living in a tiny house or in a tent. I'm 53 and I'm incredibly more bougie than I was when I was in my 20s. In my 20s, I totally would have been down with that. Now, today, I'm not down with that at all. I'm like, nope, nope, that just doesn't work for me. I thought, and you know this, when I moved out of Michigan, I thought Cheryl and I were going to be nomads. I was sure we were going to be nomads. And people like you and I tell people all the time to go play test it. And I, through no fault of my own, got to play test it ahead of time. You know what I found out? It sucked for me. Like, it's great for other people. I hated it. I needed a place that was, I love to travel, but I just need a place that's home for me. So I think that solving for flexibility is important. So even if you plan on working forever like you and I do, right? Even if you plan on working for a good long time, to still have that financially independent date that's maybe aggressive, uh, uh, for two reasons. Number one, I think a lot of people are to some degree competitive, and I'm competitive with myself. And I know that if we gamify things, and this whole book, as you know, Andy, is gamified, right? Let's turn it into a big game for ourselves so that it's more fun to go get it. But if I gamify things and say, I want to push this envelope and see how much earlier I can get this done, how much quicker can I do this? You did that with your mortgage, I mean, at some point it starts off putting a little extra money, as you know, toward your mortgage, and later on you realize you're making this serious roll. Things are really moving. You're like, oh, let's see if we can roll this ball faster. Like, let's see if we can go. And as you know better than most, the more success you have doing that, these little successes, they breed bigger successes. So I'd say still be aggressive and still set yourself a nice age. But think about this. What's cool for people like you and I who want to work forever is if I say to myself that I want to be financially independent by 55, at age 55 and after, if I decide to take a vacation and let the podcast go for a few weeks, I can do it because I don't need the revenue. I'm not worried about it. And I can go do whatever I want to do then. And how great is that to be doing something because I love it and be serving an audience that I'm helping out, but I'm not beholden to this paycheck coming every 2 weeks anymore.
I hear you. Well, I mean, a lot of people are seeking that financial independence or that retirement level, and then I can be happy. Well, we're trying to help you guys today to know that we need to find some happiness within now and that end goal. So let's talk about those intermediary steps. There's lots of other things that we can be saving and investing for. Sometimes it just becomes this sole focus of FI or sole focus of retirement. What else is there, Joe? Let's talk about this. Maybe midterm goals or short term goals. Let's start midterm, non retirement stuff. What else, as a financial advisor and just your conversations around timelining your goals in your book Stacked? What else could we be saving and investing for that maybe would land on this beautiful chart?
Boy, those are all going to be based on your goals. But I saw a lot of people saving for college, for children. That's a big one for many people. What I love once again about timelining is, what is that going to cost versus that financial independence going to cost? And as you know, college is so expensive, and college costs still going up, that you have to have a very good way to save that at least keeps up with the rising cost of inflation for college. And other thing I like about timelining is when you see how just grossly expensive this is, you start talking about your values. Am I doing it because the neighbors are doing it, or am I doing it because we value? And then the third thing you can start talking about is how much am I going to own as a parent, and how much am I going to have Junior own? Like, is Junior going to own part of this? And can I teach them some stuff maybe when they're 10, 11, 12, to start putting some money away on their side to start saving for their own things? I don't agree with people that go, well, my kid's going to pay for their college, and you never give them as a parent the tools. You have to give them the tools if you're going to expect them to help out. But to do that, I think is a fine decision if you decide that's what you want to do. But it's again, which one's more important to you? Is it more important to be quote retired at X date, or is it more important to put kids through college? Certainly, people save for things like second homes. I've seen people save for boats, and the happiest day in a boat owner's life, Andy.
Is using the other person's boat?
What absolutely.
I always like being friends with the guy who has the boat as opposed to owning it myself.
That is actually the key to true boatsmanship, I suppose. But because there is that joke, the two best days are the day they buy it and the day they sell it, right? So so but I see people buy things, but then, there's a portion of your audience, and I think I'm included in this, where it isn't about things. It's about, well, I want the freedom to travel more. I want the freedom to work in my community on nonprofits. Those are actually, people go, well, those aren't financial goals. Hell yeah, they are. They absolutely are. Because you have to have a boss that will let you do that. You have to have the right job and the right relationship with your boss. In fact, for that very reason, Andy, we have a chapter on negotiation in the book, because I think that when you get down to values based goals, a lot of the time you have to negotiate with a lot of people. You have to negotiate with your partner if you're in a relationship. You have to negotiate maybe with your boss. You might have to negotiate with customers, clients, whatever it might be. And I'll give you one of the biggest takeaways from that. I'd love to give this whole thing away, but we don't have time for all of it. So I'm going to give you the big one. The big one is every negotiation is a cube. And if you imagine that there's a cube sitting right now between Andy and I, and we're talking through something, my goal should be to see what Andy sees from his side of the cube, and the side that I can't see. The quicker I try to understand his side and to see his side of the cube, the better I'm going to negotiate. Because a lot of the time when we negotiate, we do it wrong because we're so focused on what we see. I got to travel more. Like, my boss doesn't care about any of that. But if I say, hey, you know what? I think I'm a better employee if I can take 2 hours off during the day to go work out and use it for health because of X, Y, Z. And here's how I'll make up for it in other times. Then my boss gets what they want, which is productivity. They get a better person in me as an employee. It doesn't cost the department anything. And also, when I look at the other side of the cube, I also know that maybe my boss isn't even the final decision maker. Maybe my boss has to sell it to her boss, right? Maybe she has somebody she's reporting to, so she doesn't even get to do it. So I love this idea of the cube when it comes to negotiating your goals. So once again, to directly answer your question, so it's going to be based on who you are. Might be college, might be a house, might be a boat, but it also might be these non quote monetary things that you have to rearrange your world for to be able to still afford to save for these long term goals that you want to get in your timeline, but also have some life today that is more worth living.
I love the cube reference. Again, we're going visual here. Makes a lot of sense to me too, because it reminds me of just the importance of empathy. Whether you're negotiating with your boss or you're having a conversation with your spouse, it's a lot easy for me to just spout all the things that I want, unless I'm taking the time to look at Nicole's side of the cube on what she wants as well, and that way we can come to a conclusion that you know makes this cube a happy place to live. Joe, we've had some great conversations today. Let me hear where we can get this book. I want to hear more about the book, where people can buy it. I've flown through 3 chapters already. I'm excited to get the real deal in my hands so I can read it. And I know it's out now based on when this podcast is coming out. So tell people where to get it, how they can get it.
Well, and thank you so much, by the way, for having me on and talking about getting stacked because I think that the more people we bring along to financial literacy, the better. It is. There's so many people that are left behind, and it's so exciting to be a part of, like you, this movement. And hopefully, man, you can get it everywhere. But I love two things. I love getting it from an independent bookstore. Get it wherever you can, but an independent bookstore. The audiobook's kind of fun because the woman that plays my mom, my mom doesn't play my mom, which is a whole different story. But my friend Julie Ray, actually, who plays our mom on the show, actually plays my mom in the audiobook, which is funny. But you know what? If you're at the beginning and you're really struggling, like I was way back, and I talk about this in the book when I was super broke, man, go get it from your library. You know, just go get it, go get it there, and start building your foundation.
Perfect. I love it. I'm going to be consuming this thing real fast. So, speaking of great audio, where can people listen to the Stacking Benjamins podcast?
Yes, wherever finer podcasts like Marriage, Kids, and Money are distributed, you'll also find us there. You'll find us, by the way, often, I'd say at least, what do you think, Andy? 2, 3 times a year, you'll hear Mr. Andy Hill there.
As long as I'm nice to him, as long as I don't beat him in his newest favorite board game, then he invites me.
You kick my butt at board games nonstop. No, we love having Andy on our roundtable, and we have a great time. So come join us, and you might hear Andy Hill there too.
Absolutely. And if you guys learn anything, just don't tell anybody about it because that's what they're all about there at the Stacking Benjamins podcast.
Shh, easy.
Joe, thank you so much for being here. This was a blast. Everybody, check out Stacked. Check out Stacking Benjamins. Joe, thank you so much for your time today.
Great catching up, man. Great to see you, and man, I miss you.
I miss you too.